Hey, Global Gang. This is the 13.3 preview, part 1. There will be a part 2 and potentially a part 3 preview. For this one, we're going to be focusing primarily on talking about what Riot's talking about. Snowball, game length, and objective power is generally going to be the gist of this post. So the first preview, they do have like a general list of like what they're changing and, you know, not changing, blah, blah, blah. But because those don't have the actual numbers, it's not as interesting. We'll go into that tomorrow, which will actually probably be later today, probably somewhere around 8 to 9 hours after this upload. But for now, we're going to be discussing snowball, game length, and objective power. Okay. So, one thing I do want to note before I go into this, by the way, Riot has increasingly been putting experimental changes onto the PBE, and some things, much like the Aatrox passive change, didn't go live. Now, Riot didn't say they were going to make it go live. They didn't put it in the patch preview. They didn't put it in the patch notes. At no point did they ever say it was going to go live. People assumed, because everyone spammed Twitter about it, that it was going to go live. At no point did Riot say it was going to go live. Much like with a lot of changes that they've been putting in the PBE, if something is not mentioned here, and it's not mentioned tomorrow in their actual numbers update, and if it's not mentioned in the patch notes, it's not going live. So if there's anything that you're unsure about, just pay attention to this and see if they talk about it and see if it's going live and come to the actual patch note video. If it doesn't go live, if they don't say it's going live, then it's just not going live. Okay, I just feel like saying that because a lot of people spam Twitter and spam videos out, and they're like, oh my god, the new X rework, the new X changes are coming next patch, and unless Riot says it's coming, then it's not coming. Okay, I just want to be blunt about that. Okay, so let's go through here. Snowball, game length, and objective power is still feeling pretty good. Tomorrow will be detailed patch preview, and the day after, I'm going to chat a bit more about ranked. Just not to have too much else. We'll go. So you're going to do a preview. This is technically from yesterday. I'm just uploading the video now. Then he'll have the actual numbers changes later today, and then he'll have a discussion on ranked after that. That's Kitty playing with her toy, if you're wondering what that sound is. Okay. Burst damage. The stat, I'm going to read all of this and I'm going to respond to it. Okay. So, as always, if you guys want to just listen along, put me on your second monitor, do that stuff. We're just going to be, you know, talking about this stuff, going over it. So, you can just listen along if you want, or you can watch along if you want to. Either one of these is fine. Okay. You know, put me on while you're on your phone. Pretend you have friends in the room with you. Okay, so burst damage. The stat chart changes in 14.2 aim to bring interesting choices in burst damage reductions. Compared to 13.24, most classes are surviving longer by 0 to 1 seconds in the average combat scenario, with a few exceptions. Okay, that's last season. So compared to the last patch on last season. These are mainly AD assassins and mages who are dealing and receiving more damage, as their items lost health and gained AP. Compared to the peak durability update, assassins, mages, and marksmen are dying a little faster, but fighters, tanks, and supports are a bit more durable. Okay, I just want to talk about that because I feel like, I don't think he's being like intentionally deceptive, but I feel like he's being somewhat misleading with some of the things he said here. Okay. The stat chart changes in 14.2 aimed to bring interesting choices in burst damage reductions. He's not saying that they did, he's just saying that that's what their intent was, which I thought was a bit weird with how he worded that, because with everything else here, it's a declarative statement, like these are the facts of the matter. But with this one, he said this was what we wanted. So he's not saying like, I don't actually know, based on what they said here. It's a bit weird. Did 14.2, did the health rune changes, did removing armor and magic resist, did that make more interesting choices? Did that reduce burst damage? That's what it aimed to do, but did it actually do it? Okay. Then 13.24, that's last season. So we're not talking about with the health changes here. We're just talking about compared to last season, most classes are surviving longer. But what about last patch? Compared to last patch, are they surviving longer? It's a bit weird how he's wording this. It's like he's specifically wording this in a weird way to avoid saying whether or not the health rune change was good. From what I've seen, everyone is dying way easier in the early game. I think, like, okay, so I know Global Gang is funny and it's a meme and it makes no sense and it's stupid, but when I kept asking what level was I going to gloob my enemies, you guys who were watching me, I quickly climbed to Masters and I did it using one tactic. I tried to gloob them up at level 3 every single game. And I did a poll and I did notice, I was keeping track of it, I solo killed my enemy. I gloobed them at level 3 over and over and over. Because damage, it might not seem like it, but losing 6 armor early game, let me put it this way. If your champion was nerfed, if your favorite champion was nerfed from 38 armor down to 32 armor, you'd be like, wow, there's so much squishier early game. But like Riot did that, and for some reason, people aren't acknowledging that that is a systemically large nerf to champion survivability in the early game. Now, I do agree champions in the mid to late game seem to be living a little bit longer, but a little bit is 0 to 1 seconds. So I guess with this overall, statement being made here, I guess my question to Riot is, was it worth champions being squishier early game to make them slightly tankier late game? And in addition to that, we are seeing that even with these changes, that compared to now, this is peak durability update, so they're comparing to right after the durability update when everyone was tanky, right? So at the tankiest the game has been for a long time, they're saying assassins, mages, and marksmen are dying faster, but compared to the tankiest the game has been, fighters, tanks, and supports are tankier. So we're saying right now, fighters, tanks, and supports are the tankiest they've been in like 5, 6, 7 years, right? So like durability update was what, 2 years ago? So we're saying for the last 5, 6 years, fighters, tanks, and supports are the tankiest we've ever been, which I would tentatively agree with, maybe. I want to know where exactly he's drawing his data from, but there have been other patches where, especially with like healing, when Conqueror healed more and Wit's End healed more, when Death's Dance healed more, etc., there were definitely situations where you could live very long times, right? Like, I think a lot of you probably remember that back before the whole Mythic system, it was pretty common for like late game Aatrox to take 10,000 plus damage before dying in the late game, whereas now that's not really common at all. I would say you normally take about 2 times your health bar and damage. So like Aatrox will typically take like 6, 7 to 8,000 damage before dying, like at best. Whereas in the past, like, it was pretty common. I could take 10 to 12,000 damage. When there was less health in the game, there was just so much more healing. I do agree tanks are just undeniably tankier than they've ever been. But the downside of that, and I'll get into this later because, what's his name? Matt Luang Harrison responded to a Zeet. I'm going to call it a Zeet because I feel like it's really annoying to call it that. He responded to a Zeet I said saying tanks are tankier than they've ever been, which is true. But at the same time, like, being tankier than you've ever been doesn't actually make them stronger than they've ever been. It just makes them tankier. I think, yes, tanks are tankier than they've ever been, but we're now running into an issue. And this is, I'm kind of going onto a tangent right now, but I'm just kind of sharing my thoughts blankly, so you'll just have to accept that. Okay. One of the issues with tanks just being tankier is that they've given up a lot of other things. They've given up even more ability haste. You know, it was already pretty hard to get ability haste on tanks, and now they have even less, right? They've given up even more ability haste. They've given up a lot of damage, but now in return, they get to be tankier. Which, great, but I think one of the problems now we're running into is unless your tank has a lot of base damage or, like, at the very least base utility, you're really not viable anymore. like I feel like Cho'Gath and Scion in particular went from not really being that great to just like being straight troll right now. Like Cho'Gath can tank a lot, sure, he gets mid game and he can tank, but like who cares? You know, the power spike for tanks went from 1 to 2 items to like 3 to 4 items, and I think that leaves some tanks out to dry. And in particular, it means a lot of tanks can't do enough damage to really even be acknowledged. Like, you'll just straight up ignore them. That's happening with Scion pretty frequently these days. Like, his win rate's like 46%. So, and supports, I would say supports, okay, so the problem with saying supports are tankier than they've ever been, yes, but I'm going to bring this up just to like, say something. I think one of the reasons supports are tankier than they've ever been is because, like, when you look at supports, and I always use the top 10, but, you know, because it's the easiest cutoff point, right? It just makes sense. 10, right? If you look at the top 10, the amount of enchanters in the top 10 went from like 5, 6, or 7 to we have 1, 2, 3. I'm not going to count Karma. Some of you guys might get mad at me for not counting Karma, but I'm not going to count Karma as a support right now, like an enchanter, because I'm fairly confident Karma is outputting a lot more damage than she is shielding right now. I'm just going to throw that out there, okay? So, compared to the peak durability update, compared to the tankiest the game has been in the last 5 years, I would agree fighters and tanks are arguably lasting longer. Tanks definitely. Fighters is a bit debatable. Supports, I feel that's just because more people are playing tanky supports now compared to enchanters, right? I definitely think after the durability update that enchanters were really overpowered, right? So like everyone was just playing enchanters, and then, you know, they would die quickly, but, you know, enchanters were pretty overpowered right then. And 0 to 1 seconds, again, this is really not that long of time to, like, congratulations, guys, we fixed damage creep. You now live 0 to 1 seconds longer. Like, 0 to 1 seconds can mean, like, 0.2 seconds. That can mean, literally, we have less ability haste, so you're dead, but you're just waiting that extra, like, half a second for them to get back to their ability. You know what I mean? So, okay. Anyway, it's just all my thoughts here. I just had to get them out there. Okay. It's also a little too early to tell, but it appears that mages have lost anywhere between 0.5 to 1.5% win rate in bot lane. Okay. So, again, my problem with this statement, and I don't know, I'm frustrated because, like, in the past, he's been pretty clear with his statements, but this time, it's like, what's the way to put this? I feel like I'm the shareholder and they're bringing me information about, look guys, look how good our balance patches have been, but like they're doing it in a way that is like kind of deceptive, and it just feels like they're trying to like tell me what a good job they've done. They're not like talking about their job. They're like trying to convince me they're doing a good job, which I don't like, because I feel like in the past I was just getting data. Because and let me explain here why I think that they're doing this. I have no idea what this means. Does this mean that compared to 13.24, mages have lost win rate? Compared to the peak durability update, mages have lost win rate? We can assume, based on his statement, that this is talking about, like, removing armor and MR, because, okay, to explain this, one of the reasons they wanted to remove armor and MR and move it to pure health was AD carries would very frequently not build, they'd very frequently not build MR into a mage bot lane, and then the mages would have a higher win rate into matchups where they didn't build MR, right? So by changing to a pure health system, you would assume they're now talking about this, that, aha, mages now have a lower win rate because they're not getting free win rate when AD carries forget to change their rune. But the problem is, they're not declaring when this is against. It's also a bit early to tell, but it appears that mages have lost anywhere. Well, what does that mean? Exactly, precisely. Compared to when? Compared to the peak durability update, which is what we talked about here. It's just very confusing. Okay. 14.3 will bring further reductions to burst damage from items to correct this. For some items, that reduction in burst will be added back to the AP to be interpreted by the champion's ratios, e.g. Luden's Storm Surge. For others, it will just be a straight nerf. Okay, sorry. I reread this and it made more sense to me. So basically, what he's trying to say, although he's a bit, I don't know why you're being like way too complicated about this. Basically, he's saying they're gonna nerf the proc damage on items, but give the items more AP on the item. So basically, Storm Surge will proc for less damage, but then Storm Surge will have more AP. So the general idea will be, overall, it will deal the same damage, but it won't have as much damage from the proc on the item itself, because one thing Riot has noted is that it doesn't feel really great to dodge like 2/3 of a mage's kit and then you blow up anyway. Because item damage generally is unavoidable. So long as they can hit 1 or 2 abilities on you, you're going to take all the item damage. You're not going to take their entire kit damage, but you'll take all their item damage. If items make up for 2/3 of their damage, then 2/3 of their kit becomes undodgeable. That means if you dodge half of a mage's kit, you can still take 66% of the damage. Does that make sense to everybody? And that can feel really bad. Particularly if the mage is fed, or particularly if they're just a really bursty mage. A mage might only need 66% of their damage to kill you. So if you dodge half their kit, if they only hit half their kit and then you blow up, that can feel pretty bad. Okay. That's all I have to say about this. I think I kind of went onto a long tangent about this. I guess my only issue here is I don't really like how a lot of this is worded. A lot of, and again, I feel like I'm being treated like a shareholder, and they're bringing me news about how amazing their patch is, which I get that they're trying to defend their patch, but then like you're being confusing, and I have to start feeling that you're doing it intentionally. Okay. Systemic proc nerfs, and it's weird because like this statement here, you didn't even need to be confusing on this statement. Literally just say, hey man, some items are OP and we're going to nerf them, but some items, we think their damage is fine. We just want it to be less based on the item proc damage, but we're fine with it doing the same amount of damage so long as it's not on the item proc damage, right? Like if you nerf Luden's on hit damage, if you nerf the amount of damage the item does, the proc on it by like half, but then you give it 30 more AP, it ends up overall it's doing the same damage, right? That's what they're saying, right? It's just they're being weird about it. I don't know why he's being weird. I mean, why phrase it like that? Added back to the AP to be interpreted by the champion's ratios. What does that mean? What does it mean? Just who talks like that? I'm sorry, dude, but who talks like that? I get it. Like, I know English well enough. I've read enough books in my life that I can deduce what it is you're trying to articulate here. But, some people can't. Systemic proc nerfs. Inside this bucket of changes are buffs to the AP mana items. Rod of Ages, Archangels, Malignants, Ludens. Which is fine. Honestly, I think to be blunt, Riot was being a bit too careful. Like sometimes they'll just make champions really OP and not care, and they'll just like buff them over the moon, and they just won't give a shit, I guess is the right way to put it. Like they'll just be like, yeah, we'll just see where they land, right? And it's like everyone's sitting here like that champion's gonna be overpowered, and they're like, we'll figure it out later, right? Like sometimes Riot does that, but then like this time they were being too safe. We didn't feel comfortable doing these while burst was high and AP as a whole was OP, but now that those were corrected, we're fixing the choice structure here. I don't care if like AP items are overpowered. Like I'm smart enough to know the difference. Malignance was overall, in my opinion, underpowered. I think most people would agree with that. I think Malignance obviously has some champions that abuse it, Corki and Karma, and it probably needs like a 20-second cooldown or something, like something where you can't just continuously proc it, right? Like, but overall, I would say Malignance was definitely underpowered. Archangels, Rada Ages, I didn't really see many of those. Luden's Echo also seemed to be getting outperformed. The biggest issue seemed to be Lichbane and Storm Surge, and it took you guys a long time to address it, and you still haven't addressed Lichbane. But like, if you buff these other items, I don't care, right? Like, you don't need to be that careful. I'm smart enough to know the difference between Lichbane and Rod of Ages, right? So I feel like in this case, you didn't have to be that careful. There were clearly some champions that weren't really doing good because all their items sucked, even though everyone builds AP. You know, it's like Renekton, right? Like, yes, there are some bruiser items right now that are good, but that doesn't mean that Renekton is good just because Jax is good. It doesn't mean Renekton is good because Aatrox is good, right? It doesn't mean that Yorick and Alawi and Urgot are doing good just because Riven is doing good. Like, you know, obviously I can understand the difference between items, right? So yeah. Along with these are some nerfs to Alternator, Rocket Belt, Helios, Shiv, Stormrazor, Profane, Lich, and Titanic. Which is Helios? Besides being a Catholic school, Echoes of Helia. Oh my god. I have never in my entire life had that called Helios. I'm not trying to insult him. I just literally couldn't figure out what item that was. Okay. So we are nerfing Alternator, Rocket Belt, Helia, Shiv, Stormrazor, Profane, Hydra, Lichbane, and Titanic. Good nerfs to Lichbane. I did talk about that. Weird nerf to Titanic Hydra. Don't agree with that. Profane Hydra, I'll be blunt, probably was overpowered as well. I think it was underpowered at release, but then definitely they pushed it, and it definitely felt like it was pushed a little bit too aggressively. One issue is that Profane Hydra, if you're below half, getting a 1.5 damage nuke is pretty high on champions that are stacking lethality. I've seen Profane Hydra on a lot of champions being used right now to just dead obliterate people. Particularly if you're the sort of champion that has like good front-loaded burst, like a bunch of abilities that can hit someone and then you Profane Hydra. So example, if you're playing Kayn and you WQ, cancel the Q with the Hydra. Like the W and the Q are going to bring them to half, and then the Hydra explodes them. Because, like, if I'm a Kayn and I have 400 damage, that's 600 damage on the Hydra proc. So, you know, it doesn't seem that bad to do 1.5 times damage, right? That's less than a crit. But then, like, once you factor in that this is extra damage on an item, and you're building lethality and all this stuff, making it pretty good. So, Profane Hydra was getting a bit nuts. Stormrazor, I don't think is really overpowered right now. I think they've nerfed it pretty hard. I think it's just really an unfun item. It's an unfun situation to have an item that is no ability haste, no mana, no utility, nothing, right? It does nothing other than damage. So like, it's not, those sorts of items aren't fun to fight because all my opponent is trying to do is damage. Like, all it's going to do is help champions like LeBlanc just press QR and try to get kills on that, right? Like, that's all it does. It doesn't make the game more fun or interesting because it's not doing anything. It's not adding anything to the game. It's basically death cap in another item. And I know it's not literally death cap, but like, you get the idea, right? It's just an item that all it does is damage. Rocket Belt, I mean, I guess if you guys say Rocket Belt's OP, like, I'm not against it. Static Shiv, sure. Yeah, lots of people think Static Shiv is OP. I don't know who, but I'm sure there's at least one person. Yeah, I think Lichbane definitely overpowered. Profane Hydra definitely overpowered. These two, in my opinion, were the biggest issue, like, by far. Like, ignore all these other items. These two were the biggest issue. I feel like these items are kind of getting lumped in here, but it's just these two. Profane Hydra and Lichbane were just, yeah. Our philosophy is that some procs should scale with level ratios. If it's important that they stay relevant with game time, armor, MR growth, but otherwise they should be flat damage and fall off. Well, how do you tell the difference between a proc or an item that should fall off and one that should continue to stay relevant? Right? Like how, does Titanic Hydra need to stay relevant? Does Trinity need to stay relevant? Surely every item should be relevant, right? No matter when you build it. I mean, I guess you could say some items like Rocket Belt are more geared towards early game, and that later in the game they're mostly just a mobility item. You know, I guess, but then like, I don't know. It's just a weird statement to say because like, I don't think I agree with it at all. Like, I understand what you're saying, that some items should be rush items and then fall off, and some should scale. I guess a better way to put it, in a different way, but this isn't what you're saying. The only way I would agree with this is if we're talking about items that are intended to be used with tank items, right? Basically, let's think the bruiser build, right? Like Darius goes Trinity, and then he builds a bunch of tank items, right? So for Darius, Trinity needs to stay relevant, and that's fine, right? That's kind of what the item was always designed for, that you could go Trinity and then you could go some tank items and Trinity would continue to scale, right? But I guess, you know, which of these items, are they saying that Stormrazor should just be a Giga Rush item that obliterates you early game then falls off? I don't know. It's just the way they're putting it. I don't agree with it, because I would very much not prefer there to be an item that just giga stomps people early game and then falls off as the game progresses. I would personally, I would prefer that not be in the game. You do you, Riot. I'm just saying I don't agree with your statement, and I don't like your statement. Proc damage scaling excessively with ratios turns champions into Giga delivery systems and turns already snowbally champions into Giga snowball. Yeah, I agree. No, 100%. That's like 100% a true statement. I mean, look no further than what Corky's doing, right? With like Malignance and Eclipse and that sort of stuff. Like, basically, Corky's just, as they're saying, it turns a champion into item delivery systems. He's just delivering you a Malignance. He's delivering you an Eclipse proc. And sure, his Q's hurt, but at the end of the day, it's mostly about, you know, Manamune, Eclipse, Malignance, just procking those as many times as he can. And they're like doubling or tripling the damage. I mean, I haven't mathed it out, but I'm sure they're at the very least doubling the damage that his Q's are doing at this point, which is probably hard to balance if like if a champion is like doubling their poke by building items. You're probably thinking like, man, he's not really intended to be doing that, is he? I don't think so. I think like his Q's, I think his R's are supposed to like, you know, poke at you, but I don't think they're supposed to be like destroying you. I don't think Corky is supposed to be like long range removing you from your ability to fight back because you're already at half health in a couple of his R's. See, I definitely agree. I definitely think that we should not have item delivery systems. You know, to put this in another way, we shouldn't have Ezreal Q, even though you guys love it. We probably should not have Ezreal Q. You know, just, well, I mean, in the past, it has definitely been used for exactly this. Stridebreaker is also becoming a Tiamat item, which is, you know, sure. You're going back, you're just saying we give up, which is, okay, fine. You know, in any other words, you're saying that you're admitting you're wrong, but you'd never say that, but that's what you're doing, right? Like, you're saying, like, yeah, Stridebreaker not doing damage, Stridebreaker not proccing Phase Rush has definitely made the game less interesting. To be blunt, I know I've said this, Garen with Phase Rush is, like, really annoying, but part of the problem is that if Garen doesn't go Phase Rush, then he's just kind of a boring champion, right? Like, if Garen doesn't go Phase Rush, then all he does is he just runs at you, Qs you, E's you, and then tries to ignite ult, right? Like it's just not an interesting champion without phase rush. It struggled to find an audience, and we're doing this partially to unique it against things like Ravenous and Titanic, which would otherwise cause it to be excessively bursty. Well, presumably, yeah. I mean, presumably, you wouldn't allow a champion to be able to build 2 Tiamat items, and then proc them both. I mean, I guess maybe you could. Maybe there exists a league where you could go Titanic Hydra and Ravenous Hydra and Profane Hydra and Stridebreaker Hydra. And maybe there's a world where going all 4 of those is still balanced, even though you can xylophone your keyboard and proc all 4 of them at the same frame. But it's not this league, and I think definitely Riot doesn't want things like Nocturne just R's on top of you and just goes whoop, just whoop, there's every key, whoop, and he procs 4 different Hydras. Lethality. The changes to how lethality is calculated benefited marksmen, which was intended but a little too much. Okay, so I can explain this to everyone who doesn't understand the armor system. Okay, let me math this out for you. If a champion has 80 armor, okay, the way you math that out is you do 100 divided by 100 plus their armor, which would be 180. So the damage reduction you would have at 80 armor would be, well, the damage you would take 55.5% damage. Do you get that? Then the amount of damage you would take if I had 18 lethality, right, would be 100 divided by 162. So you would now be taking 61% damage. Okay. So in other words, 18 lethality has increased my damage by 11%. Do you guys get that? Okay. Why is that important to say? Because crit, let me map this out for you guys. Crit is a 20% chance to do 75% more damage for a 15% damage increase on your attacks. So 18 lethality gives you 11% more total physical damage. 20% crit gives you 15% more total auto attack damage, but only on the damage of the auto attack, not any on hits. This basic math lesson, I hope has helped you guys understand why if lethality is giving you 11% more physical damage and crit is only giving you 15% more basic attack damage, those numbers are so close to each other that it's pretty obvious, particularly with AD carries having Lord Dominic's Regard, which has somehow become the best lethality item in the game. A lot of AD carries are now just saying screw it and opting into lethality builds. It affects their abilities, it affects any on-hit effects they have, and that's pretty powerful for them, as you can imagine. If Jin gets his lethality to make his ult do more damage, he gets lethality, which makes his Q do more damage, makes his W do more damage, right? Which is more important for him then? Is it more important to get a 4% more damage on his basic attacks, or to get 11% more damage on all his abilities? And when you look at it from that perspective, again, especially paying attention to how good Lord Dominic's Regard synergizes with lethality, you'll notice very clearly that, actually, AD carries are, by and large, now starting to opt, maybe not entirely into lethality builds, but you start Collector, you go Ghostblade, you get a Lord Dominic's Regards in there, and that might actually outperform an Infinity Edge, which I don't believe was Riot's intention. I'm not saying Infinity Edge builds are dead. I'm not saying never go Infinity Edge. I'm just trying to bring up the fact that these numbers are way closer than a lot of people suspect. Let's put it that way. People suspect that crit builds are just massively outdamaging lethality builds on basic attacks, and they aren't. They are slightly outdamaging auto attack builds. And a lot of that is due to the fact that Collector was given 6 more lethality for no reason. It was due to the fact that lethality was made to scale completely at level 1. Because remember, if at level 9, you are only getting 80% of your lethality, that's a good chunk less lethality, right? That's 20% less lethality. Okay. We're bringing Collector and Ghostblade for range down a bit, which should bring lethality marksman more in line. So Riot does not want to buff crit marksman, they just want to nerf lethality marksman, which I can see, but at the same time, at the same time, I think one of the problems that Riot is they're trying to pave over, they're trying to ignore. One of the problems is because Lord Dominic's is such a core 80 carry item, it is definitely raising an issue that Lord Dominic synergizes so well with lethality that a lot of 80 carries can scale better, potentially. I'm not saying with a full lethality build, but definitely because Collector and Lord Dominic's is already giving them 40% crit, it is quite easy to do Lord Dominic's Regards, Collector, and Infinity Edge for your crit, then maybe 1 or even 2 lethality items, and you still have 60% crit, and you still have giga crits, and now you have lethality, super buffing those crits. So, sorry, just need a little bit of stretching. I definitely do agree here with a lot of 80 carry players that it's looking a bit weird for some of their items. I definitely think Riot has put a little bit too much. I think Riot has made Kraken Slayer like weirdly overpowered at the cost of other crit items not really feeling that good. And because of that, the way I've been looking at it, unless you can go Kraken Slayer, there really doesn't seem to be a reason to just try to go full crit attack speed right now. And maybe I'm talking out of my ass, but that's just the way that I've felt from top lane by looking into bot lane. That's just the way it's been looking to me. Yeah. Support items. We're fixing some bugs with the support quest items where the minion penalty was turning on if you used every proc to last hit minions. That doesn't seem like a bug. That just seems like they tuned it a bit aggressively. And because they're not hotfixing it, I think they're erring on caution. They're just saying, look guys, these items are horribly broken. So we'll tune it back a little bit, just a little bit. This is already getting long, so I'll cover champions more in depth tomorrow, but the high level is the high level. I think what he's saying is the overall picture, not the high ranking. Yeah, okay. Adjustments. Some changes are targeted at champions who are having a sad time with systemic changes, e.g. Alawi with walls that are further away. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's kind of a big deal for Alawi. kind of sucks to play with that. Yeah, I definitely agree. Others have some role or build things we'd like to adjust, like Maokai. Boy, can you imagine if Maokai was actually like a heal tank again? And not just like this weird Teemo? I don't know a better way to put it. Can you imagine if Maokai played like Maokai and Maokai stopped playing like Teemo? It's a weird thing to say out loud, right? Like you never thought like 5 years ago you'd hear that. If I said 5 years ago, man, I wish Maokai would play like Maokai and stop playing like Teemo, you'd be like, yo, what the hell are you gloobing about? So, okay. Nerves. Champs that have been strong for a while. Looking at you, Trundle. Well, you just buffed Trundle last patch pretty considerably. Now look, I can beat the dude. I've beat him many times. Okay, I have. But I am saying that yeah, I'm not sure why you gave him more range on his Q without a compensation nerf. Seemed like the two should have gone hand in hand. I guess the only thing I can think of is that Riot wanted to see where his win rate would lie after they buffed him, so then they could, give him a more accurate nerf, right? But I guess my counterpoint to that is, well, he was already doing too good at most ranks, right? And then you buffed him. Pretty good buff at that one too. And so I definitely feel you could have just slipped some nerfs in there. And if it didn't go far enough, then you just nerf him again. And if it hit him well enough, then you just leave it there, right? So, okay. Champions with percent max HP damage that benefit from everyone having more HP. Lilia Brand. Yeah. I think these two champions might be doing good right now. I think these two champions might be a little bit overtuned right now. I'm not pointing fingers at your Riot, but I'm saying it was a little bit foreseeable. It was a little bit objectively understandable. I understand he didn't want to nerf them immediately, but if I look at last patch, I think it might have been obvious they might potentially. Oh, gosh, I think it might potentially have been obvious that they're going to be overtuned. Pro champs like Azir Karma. We overbuffed here. Really? You think I might overbuff Karma? You think you might overbuff Karma? You think you might overbuff Karma? I agree with your assessment there, sir. I definitely think overbuffed Karma. Not even going to make a joke here. Just going to agree. Yep, we definitely have overbuffed Karma. Champs like Rengar who are popping up a bit too much, as he's one of the few champs that double benefited from hubris plus profane buffs. I think. Oh my gosh, give me a message if my yawning is making you guys yawn. Yeah, leave a message. Tell me, is it helping you? Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, he benefited too much. I just want to point out that he's been overpowered for like 20 years now. So, like, League of Legends launched, he wasn't even in the game yet, and you already have 55% win rate. Bubs, some of these champions are weak, e.g. Nidalee from losing Night Harvester. Well, I'm going to be honest, I think one of the issues with Nidalee is stepping on her trap does nothing. Literally, the only thing stepping on Nidalee's trap did was proc Night Harvester, which somewhat made it scary. But, like, I feel for a champion that has an ability. Now, look, it's okay if you want her to not be a trap champion. It's okay if you don't want her to play around her traps. But at the same time, it is one of her abilities. And I think sometimes I say things without you guys, because, like, you guys aren't me. So, like, you don't know what I know, and so sometimes I say things like this, and maybe you guys don't understand why I'm being so harsh. So let me just show it to you, okay? Nidalee's traps right now do 40 to 200 damage with a 20% AP ratio. So that means a Nidalee with 500 AP does 300 damage on a rank 5 trap. 500 AP equals 300 damage on a rank 5 trap. In other words, an AD carry would have to step over like 7 traps in a row, let all of them tick completely over 4 seconds. Wait, no, that still wouldn't kill you. No, that's still, literally with the amount of health in the game right now, that still wouldn't kill you. I think if you didn't buy MR and Nidalee did true damage to you, 10. It would take about 10 traps to kill an AD carry at level 18, stepping over every trap. We're talking. I'm not joking with you guys. That is because it would do damage over further. It would take 40 seconds of stepping over traps for a squishy champion to die to them. I'm just saying their damage is low. Okay. Some are building the wrong items, like Zeri, so we're updating recommendations. Okay, I want to talk about how dumb AD carry players are, because I looked into this myself, and some are building the wrong items. Okay, what this man is saying here, what's his name? Matt. That sounds weird to say. What Frogson is saying here, he's saying, fellas, how are you this dumb? How are you this stupid? Because, look, Twitch is an ultimate. His ultimate makes him attack. He is also an AD carry. Does this champion build experimental hexplate? Let's find it. Nope. Seems being an AD carry, that building AD carry items generally is going to perform pretty dang well. We can see an experimental hexplate down here at 5% pick rate, lower win rate. And we can see that maybe it's not working out and maybe they shouldn't be doing it. So you're probably thinking to yourself, well, I'm sure Zeri players aren't doing it that much. Surely they do. Well, I'm about to show you my fine friends that in fact, despite other items being blatantly better on this champion, that Zeri is building experimental hexplate 70% of the time. That is right. Static Shiv, although it's being nerfed, and Stormrazor both blatantly outperformed experimental hexplate, and despite that, it has a 70% build rate. Now, if you want me to get the most information, if you're saying, Hashinshin, can we really tell from these few games? Look at all ranks. At all ranks. We can see right in front of us. I want to go into build paths. We can see that the average win rate on experimental hexplate, all these builds, 53, 53, 52, 55, 52, 52. Then we go into a Stormrazor build, 56, 49. Back into experimental hexplate, 51. No experimental hexplate, 56. Experimental hexplate, 44. No experimental hexplate, 55. Oh, here we have a 58 on it. No experimental hexplate, 51. 49, but correct answer. I guess what I'm just trying to say here is, look, I don't think experimental hexplate is literally trolling your team to death, but at the same time, Zeri players, I don't think it's your go-to build that you should be doing every game. I'm just throwing that out there, okay? I do think there are some games where it'll work out. I do think there are some games where it'll work out. I have seen it work out, but I've also seen a lot of Zeri players building experimental hexplate into like a double tank team. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, was this really the play? Was it really the play? So now let's go over the entire list. Tomorrow we'll have the real numbers, so I'm not going to spend too much time here. But what is happening? Champion buffs: Nidalee, Pyke, Wukong. Not really Zeri, they're just updating recommended items. Ziggs. These 4 are being buffed. Champion nerfs: Azir, good. Brand, good. Karma, good. Lilia, good. Rengo, Knifecat, good. Trundle, good. Champion adjustments: Asol. It scares me that he's being mentioned again. Yorick. Maybe these will actually go live. Corki, good. Ilaoi, good. Maokai, super good. Zyra. Shaco. Ooh. Man, every time Riot touches Shaco, he just kind of... It's like they always nerf his best build and then make his worst build slightly better. Any Shaco players? Anyone want to comment? Did I hit it? Is that what they do? They just nerf his best builds and then make his really bad build slightly better. Not good, just slightly better. That's some good stuff right there. System nerfs. System buffs. Ginso's Rage Blade. Fine. Essence Reaver. Luden's Companion. Malignant? Archangels, Seraphs, whatever. Rod of Ages. Ooh, I'm a bit confused. I do think Malignance is underpowered, like on average, but I do think it's very abusable in some champions. So I'm really hoping Riot, like maybe the nerf is they just give it like a cooldown of 10 seconds, like buff it, but then put a cooldown on it of like 15 seconds, something like that. Because like Riot, I'm so tired of getting half health by Karma. You don't understand. It's breaking my brain. I'm not even tired right now. This is just my brain when I get hit by Karma's RQ over and over again. I'm dying. System nerfs, Collector, good. Canic Rookern, bad. Really bad. I think I'll talk about this tomorrow. We'll see. Yuma's Ghostblade. I don't know. My problem with Yoma's Ghostblade is it feels like they're kind of trying to like punish AD carries for not building AD carry items, right? It's like I don't think lethality AD carries are like overpowered right now. Not really. Like in the grand scheme of things, like if you told me what should we nerf? What is currently performing the best? What is performing too good? I would say Lichbane, I would say Profane Hydra. I'd probably focus on those two. And then I would go on to specific champions. And I'm going to be blunt with you. I don't think there's any AD carry I would actually call out. Draven, probably. But Draven's been overpowered for 12 years now, dude. Draven's so overpowered, he's going to go into his own game called Draven's Paradise. We've been spending most of our life living in a Draven's paradise. So, I don't know. To me, it just feels like, I don't know. I would not call AD carries overpowered right now. I think that it's annoying when they get a lot of health, but I wouldn't call out any AD carry for being overpowered, is just what I'm trying to say. System adjustments, item proc damage, good. Static Shiv, questionable. Because every time Riot touches Static Shiv, I swear to God, it just somehow gets more annoying. Stridebreaker, good. So come back tomorrow, and we will have these specific buffs, these specific numbers, I should call it, on this stuff, as well as more good discussions from my good friend Riot Froxon. I'm not calling him by his name. I know he's got his name here. That just feels weird to me. I'm sorry. Like, dude, I don't know you. You don't know me. We've never talked. Calling you by your first name would be weird. You know? Okay. So thank you all for watching. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, everybody. And as always, I hope you all have a good Glorben day. Thank you, Glorb gang. Bye-bye, everybody.